الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا وسيدنا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن استنى بسنته ومن اكتفى بهديه إلى يوم الدين. اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يا رب العالمين. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. That was pretty lame. How many people here took my Muslim class in Kenya? You guys remember what I did when the class first started? I did this really annoying thing that I do. Some of the speakers do as well, where I don't start the lecture until I can hear the room roar and rumble. So the goal, inshallah, is that if there's somebody walking around outside, and I always say this, that we want them to hear the sound coming out of this room. Right? So they're like, whoa, what's going on in there? Better go find out. Right? You ready? Yeah?
Yeah! Yeah! Woo!
Assalamu alaikum. Alright, we're going to do this again. Like I said, it's annoying. A lot of people find it really, really annoying. But that's just my rule. You're going to have to deal with it. Until we can feel the room shake, we're not going to continue. Alright? You ready? Yeah? Assalamu alaikum. Okay, starting off with Novelty of Now, first and foremost, I would like to thank everyone who helped put this together. George Mason, MSA. I think a lecture series like this, or speaking about these topics, it's about time that we did something like this. I remember, subhanAllah, if I go back to before I left for Medina, back when I started studying Islam, and I was actually new to Islam as well, it was unheard of that you would have an event like this, where somebody would say, you know what, everything else is great, all the other Islamic subjects are great, and that's fine, but let's take like these taboo topics and let's have like an open discussion about it. And let's admit the fact that just because we're Muslim, it doesn't make us immune to other problems or problems that exist in the society that we live in. Because the reality is that we are all part of this society, we all live in America as Americans. So a lot of the problems that this society has, it translates into Muslim culture or Muslim society as well. And subhanAllah, if you take a look at an issue like pornography, this is an issue which it's not only, it's like a worldwide problem, it's a worldwide issue. It's not just Muslims in America, it's Muslims all over the world. Yeah. Okay, so it's not only Muslims in America, but it's Muslims all over the world. It's a worldwide problem. Every culture, every society is dealing with this issue of pornography. But the problem is, us as Muslims, are we doing something to address this issue? And so I think talking about it, talking about the reality of what pornography is, the effects of pornography and all of that, is the very first step. So I hope, inshallah ta'ala, this is just a stepping stone for us. This is a place for us to jump off from here and go carry this discussion on further, where we actually come to practical solutions. And at the end of the talk today, inshallah ta'ala, I will give you some pieces of advice, some tips that I have in terms of how to address or how to overcome pornography addiction. And I know, subhanAllah, as soon as I say pornography addiction, most people who view pornography or who have access to pornography, most people don't view themselves as addicts. And subhanAllah, and the people that I've counseled and the people who come up to me and they've talked to me about the issue of pornography, it's usually at a state where a person admits to themselves and they say, you know what, I think I'm addicted to pornography. Shaykh, help me solve this problem. And subhanAllah, there are so many people who haven't reached that stage yet. Or they may actually be at that stage yet, but they haven't told themselves, they haven't realized that they have an addiction. And subhanAllah, the issue of pornography, it starts way, way, way before addiction. And subhanAllah, I grew up in America. And I remember, like most people in America, especially young boys, we all can probably recall the first time that we were exposed to pornography or nudity or something like that. And subhanAllah, usually for most people, it's a strong memory because it was such a shocking thing where you're like, you're this young, innocent little kid, and someone says, here, check this out, right? And you're like, whoa, that's strange, that's crazy, what is this? What else you got, right? Like, show me more like that. And subhanAllah, in speaking to a lot of parents, I often say, I remember a while back, I was teaching a class to a bunch of young people. It was, I think, anywhere from 11 to 14-year-old boys and girls. And I was teaching this class, and we were talking about tafsir. And I started talking about some ayat in Surah Nur, and the ayat of zina, of adultery came up, and the punishment for adultery, and we discussed that issue. And subhanAllah, the very next day, I got a very angry email from one of the mothers of one of the young girls who was in the class. And she's like, I don't appreciate you talking to my child about zina, about adultery, and sex, and things like this. And I said, subhanAllah, first of all, I was very shocked that the mother would be offended by something like that. Number two, I actually felt really bad of how ignorant this child's mother actually was. Where this child thought that their 12-year-old daughter has no idea what sex is, and their 12-year-old daughter has no idea what zina and adultery and things like that are. And I thought to myself, I said, subhanAllah, and I said this to the mother as well, but I said, subhanAllah, if we don't talk about these issues, if we don't address these issues, they're going to be left to other people. And they're going to be left to people who aren't qualified or people who have skewed opinions or skewed perceptions about what this issue actually is. It's about even something like sex. I'm a proponent of Muslims talking to their children about sex before they ever are exposed to it in any other way. Because the first impression that you have, or the first thing that you hear about sex and sexuality, or the first impression you have about pornography, this and that is going to be very, very strong for you. And for a lot of kids, that first impression, it doesn't come from their parents. It doesn't come from one of their teachers or something like that. It comes from their peers, right? And especially if you go to like a non-Muslim school or whatever, they hear things that are very detrimental. And subhanAllah, even in talking to, and I do get the chance every once in a while to counsel people in marital situations, people who are having marital problems. And a lot of the problems, subhanAllah, what I found in doing marriage counseling, a lot of the problems that I found is that a lot of problems are not what they seem. So, for example, a wife says to her husband, or she thinks about her husband that he doesn't care about me, and he doesn't put any effort into our relationship or whatever, and that's the surface level problem, but there are problems that have led up to that issue. And subhanAllah, some of the problems go back to something like pornography. And especially when it comes to couples counseling and things like that, men are very, very, very shy to admit that they view pornography. And subhanAllah, I remember speaking to one brother, and I was listening to his problems, listening to his issues, and I thought to myself, I said, a lot of these problems that you're having, issues of intimacy and things like this, I said, in my head, I'm like, I know these are stemming from pornography. And I was waiting for him to I was like, okay, we're having an honest discussion here. We're trying to, solve the problem that you're having in your relationship, whatever. And I said to myself, listen, I was waiting for him to say something about pornography and say, you know what? Yeah, I have an issue with pornography. And he never said anything. At the end of this discussion, I spoke to him privately, and I said, listen, do you watch pornography? And he goes, no, I don't. And I said, come on, listen, just be honest with me. I said, listen, if you want me to help you with your problems, if you want me to help you solve these issues that you're having in your relationship, I need to know these things. And he goes, and then eventually, after I pushed him, he goes, yeah, not really, like sometimes, like every once in a while. But I'm not like a porn addict or something, right? And I thought to myself, I said, SubhanAllah, you don't know if you're a porn addict. Most people who are leading a life where they will end up in addiction, on that path, they don't realize the path that they're on, right? They're in a state of denial. And so I really had to push this brother, and it came out, by the end of our discussion, it came out that he views pornography at least 2 to 3 times a week, right? And I said, SubhanAllah, you think that's not an addiction? The fact that you feel like you have to view pornography? 2 to 3 times a week or whatever. He said, yeah, it's not a big deal. It's normal. Like, doesn't everyone do it anyway? And somehow that is one of the big issues when it comes to pornography. The fact that it is widely accepted in our society. The fact that, obviously, as we know, it's something which is legal, right? And so, we tend to look at this issue and think of it not as something which is not such a big deal. And it's only now, subhanAllah, alhamdulillah, this is happening, but it's only now that Muslims and non-Muslims, especially non-Muslims, when they go back to the research and they're doing studies and tests and things like this, now they're beginning to realize all the problems that come from a society where pornography is rampant. And subhanAllah, just to start off, I have some facts and figures here for you. 25% of what is viewed online, so 25% of the searches are pornography. Now, are you guys looking at the second fact? Okay. In 2010, they did a study, and they collected the data for the top 10 countries that view and search for pornography. And this is what they found. Out of the top 10 countries, 6 of them were Muslim countries. And out of the top 8 countries, actually, if you take out the last 2, the top 8, 6 of the 8 are Muslim countries. Right? And if you actually think about, subhanAllah, the fact that if you think about, let's be real here, most Muslim countries are not doing that well financially and so on and so forth. A lot of people in Muslim countries don't even have access to the internet, right? Compared to the West, compared to countries that are more well off. How many people must be viewing pornography that even though they're small, that how much pornography had to be viewed for them to jump up to the number 1, number 2, or number 5, 6, or that level? Right? And subhanAllah, I don't know if anyone's actually read this study, but the details of the study are more scary than what's here. The details of the study say that Muslim countries lead in the most perverse terms when it comes to searching for pornographic terms or pornographic searches. So things like animal sex, right? Things like homosexual acts, even things like child pornography. That it is the Muslim countries that lead in those types of, this is the detail of the searches. And somehow this is the same study that found that if you take a country like Saudi Arabia, for example. Any Saudis here, by the way? Any Saudis? Just a few. Okay, I spent about 7 years in Saudi Arabia, in Medina, alhamdulillah. And like every society, they have their good and bad. And I know how a lot of people, they tend to take 2 views when it comes to Saudi Arabia. They either think Saudi Arabia is like the devil, right? Or they think everything that happens in Saudi Arabia is perfect. And neither of that is true. And obviously that's a very extreme view when it comes to not only Saudi Arabia, but any type of country. Right? They have their goods and they have their bads, like every single society. But one of the evils that they have, and one of the problems that they have, is when it comes to, so in this study they found that 70% of the images that were exchanged on cell phones were pornography in Saudi Arabia. 70%. So basically, here's what that looks like. If you take 10 people and you line them up, 7 of them are sharing pornography with other people. So there's only 3 people who are not sharing pornography. And subhanAllah, even more scary than that, and I know subhanAllah, the brother spoke about Arabic and how Arabic is a sacred language for us as Muslims. Arabic is the language of the Quran. Arabic is the language of the people of Jannah. Arabic is the language by which the wahi, the revelation, was preserved for us. Arabic as a language itself is a miracle. But the second most used language when it comes to searching for pornography is what? Is Arabic. Right? The first obviously is English. But the second most used language is Arabic, the language of the Quran. Right? And this panel, these are just some facts. If you actually read the details of this study, what they found here, it's very, very scary. It's very, very scary. And it's one of those issues I think especially in Muslim countries, and we don't want that to happen here. We don't want that to happen to Muslims in America. But in Muslim countries, like, this issue doesn't even get talked about. It's very rare that people openly talk about this issue, right? And I hope that, inshallah ta'ala, at least us as Muslims living in America, we can save ourselves from that type of peril, right? Where, yes, when imams and scholars and all that, when they talk about issues, especially on the minbar, when they talk about things in the Jummah khutbah and lectures and all that, and all the stuff they talk about is great, alhamdulillah. And there's, inshallah ta'ala, there's a need for everything that they share, and there's benefit in all of that. But we need to have open discussions about things like pornography. We need to make it so that a person who feels like they have a problem with pornography can feel comfortable going to a counselor, or feel comfortable going to their imam or their sheikh, or at least someone that they look up to, or an older brother, or someone that they can talk to. And one of the problems that a lot of people have, people who are dealing with pornography addiction, right, is that they feel like they have no one to talk to. They're so ashamed of what they're doing that they just keep doing what they're doing and they don't seek out any help, right? They're too afraid to and that's subhanAllah. When someone comes up to me and they say to me, like, I'm addicted to pornography, I immediately have an immense amount of respect for this person. And I always tell this to them. I say, listen, you may think that because you came up to me and you told me that you have a problem with pornography or that you view pornography or whatever, that I'm going to look down upon you. I have a tremendous amount of respect for you. Right? Why? Because the same thing happened, or a similar thing happened, at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There was a man, and this story is mentioned in the Muslim of Imam Ahmad, a man, a young boy, and they say about this, not a young boy, but like a young man. They say about this young man that he liked sleeping around, right? He enjoyed women and this and that, and that's like one of the problems that he was dealing with. And so he came to the Messenger of Allah, and he said, "Oh, Messenger of Allah," he said, "Can you make it permissible or can you make adultery permissible? Can you make it permissible for me to commit adultery?" Right? He said, "Why is it that I have to be married to someone in order to have sex with them?" And the Prophet ﷺ, it's very interesting that the way the Prophet ﷺ responded to this young companion. In our times, you may hear someone says that to like Imam Shaykh, whatever, they may say something like, "Astaghfirullah, it's haram, you should be ashamed of yourself," and so on and so forth, to make this person feel extremely guilty, right? To the point where the next time they have that type of issue, they're not even going to go talk about it, right? But the Prophet ﷺ, he put his hand on this young man's shoulder, and he said to him, "How would you like it if someone committed zina or adultery with your mother? Or how would you like it if someone committed adultery with your sister, or your khalas, your aunt, or one of your other female relatives? Would you like it for them? Would you like that, I say it's permissible for someone to commit zina with your female relatives?" And he said, "No." He said, "There's no way I would accept that." And so the Prophet ﷺ said that if you don't accept it for your own relatives, why would you accept it for the women that you want to commit adultery? Why is it okay? Right? And then, subhanAllah, the Prophet ﷺ, with his hand on his shoulder, he made dua for him. He said, "Oh Allah, make him chaste." Right? And subhanAllah, if you look at the way the Prophet ﷺ approached the situation, there's a couple things happening here. Number one, the Prophet ﷺ didn't make him feel guilty, but the Prophet ﷺ made him realize the dangers of what he's asking for. And he made him realize the problem with, it's very easy to say, you know what, just do whatever you feel is good to you. Just do whatever feels good. And subhanAllah, people who lead a life like that, people who say just do whatever makes you feel good, or like the Irish saying they have is eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you will die. Has anyone heard this before? It's like a bar chant or whatever. Right? Basically the point is just do whatever you want because you're going to die tomorrow. Just have fun. Right? Just enjoy yourself. And subhanAllah, it's very easy to adopt that type of aqidah, that type of faith, that type of lifestyle, because you just do whatever makes you feel good. But if you were to just take a moment and think about the consequences of doing whatever you feel like doing, whatever you want, you'll very quickly come to the realization that that's not a proper way to live your life. And you're going to be causing a lot of damage, a lot of harm, not only to other people, but to yourself as well. And so the Prophet ﷺ made him understand that, made him understand the problems in doing something, like making something like zina, or making something like that, something like adultery, making that halal. And that is the approach, and I believe, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, but that is at least one of the approaches that we need to take to an issue like an issue of pornography. Where it's not about, the halal haram. Of course it's haram, there's no doubt about that. There is no difference amongst the scholars about the issue of is it halal to look at pornography or not. Right? There's not a single scholar who says, you know what, it's okay for you to, well, maybe you shouldn't watch pornography, but it's okay for you to like flip through a Playboy sometimes. Like there's no scholar who says that. Right? And I know, subhanAllah, sometimes the issue of like masturbation comes up, and someone said, and I had subhanAllah, I had someone come to me, and they say, and they're like, what's wrong with pornography? Didn't some scholars say that masturbation is okay? Right? Isn't it a difference of opinion that some scholars say it's okay? And I said, yeah, of course, there's no doubt. Even though like majority of scholars do not consider masturbation to be permissible, there are many scholars who said that if there's a need for it, that is permissible for someone to masturbate. But that's not the problem here. The problem is what is associated with masturbation. Right? It's very, very rare in our times where someone masturbates without any type of, without anything there to help arouse them. Right? It just doesn't happen. Right? It's funny, even the scholars who said like masturbation is permissible, what they meant was that you're in a situation where you're about to commit adultery. Right? And your desires have overtaken you to the point where you cannot control yourself. And at this point, it's either you masturbate or you commit zina. And in that situation, yeah, okay, it's halal for you to, it's halal for you to masturbate. And they wouldn't even say halal, they would say it's makruh. It is disliked, right? But it is permissible. Right? No one ever said, yeah, you know what, if you feel the need to masturbate, it's okay for you to go like youporn.com, open up the website and be like, yo, look, let me go ahead. I'm in need right now. Like, I have to do this. The scholar said, in the time of need, I have to do this, so this is a time of need. Right? So that's not an issue here. And like I said, the issue of halal haram, I think almost anyone, if you were to ask yourself, as Prophet said, if you were to ask yourself, right, ask your heart, there's no issue here. Everyone understands that watching pornography is something which is not permissible in Islam. But the issue here is that putting it in context of, or putting pornography in context. Us understanding the harms and the dangers of pornography. And subhanAllah, if you were to actually do some research and look into the harms of pornography or how pornography affects us, there is so much data out there. Even if subhanAllah, when we were preparing for this talk, I was overwhelmed with the amount of data that is out there, the amount of studies, the amount of research that is done. I guess a lot of people are concerned about pornography and masturbating and stuff, right? So a lot of research has gone into this. But it's out there, right? SubhanAllah, even the issue of how viewing pornography affects the brain. Like neurologists have studied the brain to see what happens in the brain when a person views pornography. And what they found is that just like, when it comes to drugs and things like that, you got the last slide. Yeah. Just like when it comes to drugs and things like that, what happens is there is a chemical in the brain called dopamine. It's like the pleasure chemical. When you come across something which is pleasurable to you, dopamine is released in your brain. Right? That's the way pleasure works. And the same thing is true with food and things like that, and sex, where if you find something pleasurable, there is dopamine released in your brain. Now, when it comes to things like drugs, and especially drugs like cocaine, when you take cocaine, when you use cocaine, the dopamine, there's a surge of dopamine in your brain, right? And this is why you feel this immense amount of pleasure when you take that certain drug. And they found that the very similar thing happens when it comes to pornography. And they sat some people down, they hooked up some wires to their head, they said, here, yallah, go watch some porn, you want to study your brain, right? And what they found is that there was a surge in dopamine. And this is why they found that, like drugs, pornography can very, very quickly become addictive. Very, very quickly can become addictive because the same thing happens. Just like with certain drugs, it's very quick to fall into an addiction when it comes to a drug. Even a person who says, I'm not going to I'll be okay, whatever, even that type of person can very quickly become addicted to that type of drug. So what they found is that not only is there a surge of dopamine, there are pathways that get created in your brain. So when you expose yourself to something, there's a pathway that gets created in your brain. And the more you expose yourself to it, the stronger that pathway, that connection gets. And what they found with pornography is that when a person views pornography or they view sexual images and things like that, that pathway is extremely strong, right? Very, very, very strong. And and even the issue with pornography is that it's not even an issue of, like, if you view it, and some people say, like, if you view pornography a lot, that's when you become addicted. What they found is that even if you view pornography just once, there's a pathway that gets created in your brain, and that in your brain, like, what happens is that that image is so strong for that individual that it keeps repeating itself in their head, right? And this is why if you ever look at pornography and you said, I'm never going to look at that again, it may be like a day later, 2 days later, 3 days later, 4 days later, that image may still be playing in your head. And this is why when I said, if you think about the first time you were exposed to pornography, I'm sure most people, I'm not going to ask you to tell me, but if I were to ask you and say, can you remember what that image was, or what was happening in that image, you can probably remember. All right? And that shows you how strong that connection was when the person was exposed to that pornography. Just like other addictions. So, like I said, it can very quickly become an addiction. Just like other addictions, they have certain characteristics. So, number one, a higher tolerance and desensitization. So this is something that we see happen in other drugs, and we see it happen with pornography as well. That the more you expose yourself to it, the more you need to feel satisfied. Right? And it's not only that, it actually escalates. So the more you watch pornography, the more you need to watch. And what they found is it's not just an issue of quantity, it's actually an issue of the type of pornography as well. So if you watch like a certain type of pornography, let's say a person, it's possible someone starts off with something like softcore porn, right? They watch something like that, the next time they're going to need something a little bit more exciting, something a little bit more extreme. And then the next time they watch it, they're going to need something even more extreme, and so on and so forth. Because what's happening is that our brain, because of that surge of dopamine, we need to feel that same high. We need something else, something novel, right? And this is why, the scientists who study the issue of pornography, they said it's not just about the nudity, it's about the novelty of pornography. The fact that a person can log onto the internet, and it's not just they're watching one woman do one thing, they can watch multiple different women doing multiple different things, and this and that, and because of that novelty, you need that to feel that same pleasure. And and I have a couple of these studies here, if you go to the next slide. They did a study in Australia, where once again, they got a bunch of men together, and they showed them pornographic images, right? But they only showed them one image. It was like an image of one woman who was nude, or she was involved in some type of pornographic scene or something like that. And they showed it to the men over and over again. What they found is that their arousal, it kept getting lower and lower with the same image. But this point here, where there was a spike, they found this spike when they changed the image. As soon as they brought a new image, so they were shown this new type of pornography, immediately their arousal levels went up, right? And they even studied sheep, and once again, what they found is that if they took a male sheep, and they had him have intercourse with a female sheep, and they found with each time that this sheep would have intercourse, that the amount of time it took for him to reach climax or to ejaculate, that it took longer and longer and longer with the same partner. But in the second graph here, in the second part of the graph, when they introduced different types of sheep, or they introduced sheep it was a different sheep, it wasn't the same, even though all sheep probably look the same to us, to that sheep, he was like, this is a different sheep, right? What they found is that each of those colors is a new sheep, right? It's a new female. So with a new female, they found that the time to ejaculation was shorter, right? And so what happens, and the same thing happens in pornography. We can go back to the... What happens in pornography is the same thing. That a person may view pornography, and let's say it takes them like 3 minutes, which is probably pretty average, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, whatever, to have an orgasm, right? The next time, if they were to look at that same image, that same video, that same scene or whatever, it would take them longer than 3 minutes. However, if they're able to bring new images and new videos and new things, then they're able to reach their climax in the same short amount of time that they were to before. And this is how what happens is that a person goes from something which would be considered more normal in society to something which would be a lot more extreme. Number two, Self-deception. So with all other addictions, the same thing happens here, is that a person will start to deceive themselves. They will start to tell themselves, they'll start to rationalize their addiction. A person may even say that I'm not addicted. Right? And this is very common, subhanAllah, especially with porn addiction. Most people who are addicted to porn, as I said before, they don't feel like they're addicted to porn. Right? They're like, no, I'm okay, I don't have a problem. Right? And this is common with other addictions as well. Or they may try to rationalize their addiction. So they may say something like, you know what, it's so difficult to get married in this day and age. It's okay, let me just do it now for a while. Once I get married, I'll stop. Right? And there's a host of other problems that comes with that issue as well. Number 3, a loss of control. With just like all other addictions, a person who gets addicted to pornography, they lose control of their own behavior. So a person may understand the consequences of this action. So they may know all the harms and all the issues that come to a person, their iman, their life, their relationships, everything. They may know all the harms of pornography, but at the same time, they can't stop. Right? They have lost control over themselves. Number 4, a distortion of attention. And this is basically when a person, they have, in their normal life, they give attention to certain things and certain people, but because of their addiction, their attention has changed. Right? So for example, if a person, and a good example, this is a person, let's say there's a brother who's married, if he did not have a pornography addiction, he may give his wife a certain amount of time, or he may have a certain type of relationship with his wife, but because of his pornography addiction, his relationship is very, very different. Number 5, symptoms of withdrawal. So just like with other addictions, if you were to cut this person off from what they're addicted to, they would suffer the same types of withdrawal symptoms. Irritability, depression, and anxiety and things like that, all that occurs with pornography as well. Pornography, what we know from pornography is that it does a very good job of changing what a person views to be normal. Right? So if you take a look at a person's life before they started watching pornography and after they started watching pornography, what they will notice is that what they viewed to be normal has very quickly changed. And subhanAllah, it's actually very smart how porn movies and the porn industry actually goes about doing this. And subhanAllah, when I read this, I thought, I was like, subhanAllah, this is really smart in the way they get people to get addicted to these abnormal behaviors, or when they begin to find these abnormal behaviors attractive and good, and they begin to become aroused by these abnormal behaviors. And subhanAllah, you know how I talked about, that when it comes to the Muslim countries, one of the top searches was child pornography, right? Now, we will look at child pornography and be like, that is disgusting. That is sick. How would someone in their right mind be aroused by child pornography? Right? And I'll tell you how it works. Here's how it works. The way the porn industry works is that they slowly, well, not so slowly, but they, in a very step-by-step way, they desensitize you to these type of things. So the first time a person, let's say they look at pornography for the first time, they may see a act that they consider to be normal. There's a guy having vaginal sex with a girl, right? Nothing odd about that. They view that to be normal, no big deal. But a couple scenes later, in the same pornography, this man begins to have anal sex with that girl, right? And initially he's like, that's kind of weird. But then he notices that he was aroused to begin with, and now he begins to find that arousing as well, right? And then it goes further, and other things are performed. You introduce other partners and this and that, and it can even lead to things like, we know the amount of craziness that's out there, but humiliation, beating, there's rape porn, child pornography and things like that. And it's kind of like if you were to take this person and the first time you showed them pornography, you showed them something like that, they'd be like, that's disgusting. But the fact that it was gradual, they took something that they found to be normal and they attached something abnormal to that, now they're in a situation where they find that to be normal. And this is very, very common. So a person, they find themselves in a situation, and I know subhanAllah, I was speaking to this one brother, and he said to me, after I'm done masturbating, he said, I'm disgusted at myself, and he said, I'm disgusted at what I was looking at. Right? He's like, I find it to be disgusting. And he's like, I don't understand why, before I had an orgasm, that I didn't find it to be disgusting. It was turning me on. Right? And the problem here is that once again, the person was desensitized. And not only were they desensitized, they felt like they needed that in order to be turned on. What they found as well regarding pornography is that when it comes to relationships, it's very detrimental to a person's sex life. One of the biggest issues is expectations that a spouse will have, someone will have from their spouse. When a person watches pornography, or they get addicted to pornography, or they're exposed to pornography, they begin to view certain things, not only, as I said, not only as normal, but also something that they need to be aroused. Right? So they need this certain action to be aroused, and they may even turn to their spouse and go to their spouse and say, you know what, let's try this, something which is different. Right? And it may work for a while. Right? It may, for the first time they have sex, or the second time, whatever, it may work for about a while, but eventually, what they'll find is that they're not aroused in the same way that they were aroused when they were looking at pornography. Right? It's not the same. And just the fact that this person's having sex with a single partner, right? So for example, there's a guy who watches pornography or whatever, and his wife does, right, everything that this certain porn star does in that porn video, right? Does everything. But the fact that she is one person and she's not multiple partners, that may be enough for him to not be aroused by her, not be turned on. And subhanAllah, not only that, we have an issue now of ED. You guys know what ED is? Erectile dysfunction. Basically, if you don't know what that is, that's basically when a guy can't get it up, right? And in the past, what they found is that people who got erectile dysfunction, it was the older generation. It's when a person got old, and because of physical problems, because of their age and so on and so forth, they could not hold an erection, right? And they never found, it was very rare that someone under the age of like 40 or 45 who would have erectile dysfunction. Now, in our times, they find that a lot of young people, when I say young, I don't mean like 30s, I mean like 20s, and even in their teens. There are people in their teens who can't get it up, right? And the issue here is this is not a physical problem. You know, you can't treat it with drugs and things like that. It's a psychological problem. It's how they have desensitized themselves to these, how they've desensitized themselves, and they need these perverted or these really extreme type of images to be turned on. Right? And one of the examples that I've heard about this is that if you were to imagine that someone who stands up and they're next to like a fire, like someone turns on the fire alarm, and they're right next to the place where the sound of the fire alarm is coming out, right? And it's super, so if you've ever been in a situation where there's a fire alarm going off, it's super loud, right? Extremely loud. And this person covers their ears, right? Because it's too loud for them. Now, while this person has their ears covered, if you were to walk up to this person and try to have a conversation with them, they'd be like, I have no idea what you're talking about, right? They can't hear you, right? The same thing, it's an analogy with pornography as well, where a person has brought themselves to a level where they have numbed their senses and they've numbed their arousal, where they need a certain level of a certain type of images, a certain extreme images before they can be aroused. Right? And that causes a person to have erectile dysfunction. Also the fact that a person, as we said, neurologically, it actually alters pathways in the brain. Right? So a person, what they find, like the way they get off, with the way they're used to getting off, because they do it so often, is that they sit by themselves in front of a computer screen or whatever, and they will have like 20 tabs open, and they're going from video to video to video, or whatever, and different sites and all that, and they're looking at 10 different types of pornography, and they get off that way. Right? And that's how you have trained your brain to be aroused. And you take that person, you put them in a situation where they're having sex with a real woman, for example, they cannot perform. Right? And they'll go to a doctor and be like, I think I have erectile dysfunction, do you have any drugs? Give me some Viagra or something like that. Viagra is not going to solve anything in this situation. Right? Because the issue is that the porn that they have exposed themselves to. Also, what we're finding now is that porn is linked to a lot of psychological illnesses. And subhanAllah, it's very interesting how now what they're finding is that there's people who have different psychological illnesses, depression, anxiety, even obsessive-compulsive disorder, and many other problems. For the longest time, psychologists and psychiatrists, they were treating the problem, right? Where somebody would be like, I'm having depression, so they'd give them, like, Zoloft or whatever they prescribe for prescription, for depression, right? And what they find now is that a lot of these psychiatrists, they're just trying to solve the symptoms. Because all of these things that are happening are a symptom of their use of pornography or the fact that they have viewed pornography so much. And what a lot of psychologists are finding now is that when they address the actual problem, the issue of their addiction to pornography, that a lot of these issues just go away on their own. Not only that, pornography also affects a person's self-esteem or their self-images, in guys and girls. And by the way, I know like people, when they think of pornography, they only think of guys, and it's true, it's more so the guys that view pornography, but it's becoming more and more culturally acceptable in our society for women to view pornography as well. Right? And I know like guys would be like, that doesn't make any sense, like women are wired like, that's not how they work. Like I said, if you put the person in front of pornography, because of the surge of dopamine, because of new brain, paths being created in the brain, even they can be addicted to pornography and they can be in a situation where they require pornography. So when it comes to a person's self-esteem and self-image, here's a problem that a lot of guys are having. Okay, and the problem is this, that, you know, especially young boys, and as I mentioned before, it's a lot of times it's at a young age, and actually one of the studies found that most people are like the average age when most people their first experience with pornography happens around the age of 10. And that's the average age when most people are exposed to pornography. So you take this young boy and you show this young boy pornography, and this person starts watching pornography, and they feel aroused by it, and so on and so forth. Now, as they watch pornography, they begin to have a certain image of what normal is, right? So they look at this person, this porn star, for example, this guy who's been having sex for like 30, 40, 50 minutes, right? And he has an erection that just never dies, right? And so this young boy, he begins to think of himself, when he's actually married, let's say years later, when he gets married, he's in a situation where he cannot last more than like 4 minutes, or 5 minutes, or 10 minutes. Right? He will look at that and feel bad about himself and say, you know what, there's something wrong with me. And even the opposite of that is true as well. A girl or a woman, for example, who has watched a lot of pornography, she may turn to her husband and be like, what's wrong with you? Why can't you last 2.5 hours? Right? That there's something wrong with you. Right? And that's her perception of what a guy is supposed to be like. And a young man's his perception of what a young man is supposed to be like, and how they're supposed to act, and how they're supposed to behave in sex. And subhanAllah, you know, the sex that takes place in pornography and the sex that takes place in real life is very, very different. Pornography is all about immediate pleasure. It's about shock value. If you think about when people watch pornography, it's about fast forwarding, clicking through, and just anything you can do to get yourself aroused to have an orgasm as quick as possible. Real sex is not just about the orgasm. It's about human touch. It's about feelings. It's about love. It's about caressing. Just the fact that sex has everything to do with touch, the fact that you are aroused by touch and feeling the other person, that's not found in pornography. So this whole time, let's say this person has viewed pornography for 5 or 10 years or whatever, in their brain, the brain doesn't understand that touch is supposed to turn you on. That feeling love and feeling connection is supposed to turn you on. They just don't get that. And this is why, like I said, they may not be able to perform. Right? And because this is not the type of sex that they're used to. And even young girls who watch pornography, and we live in a culture where, and I know the whole time I've been saying pornography, most people are thinking of as I said, hardcore pornography. And subhanAllah, we live in a time where there's pornography on TV. Right? You take, a lot of TV shows these days, if you were to play them 10 years ago or 15 years ago, people would be like, this is porn, right? There's a show by the name of Game of Thrones, right? You guys heard about it? People are like, no, we haven't heard about it. Game of Thrones, full of nudity, full of scenes of people having sex. Movies come out every day. And I remember subhanAllah when the movie 300 came out, right? I know there's a sequel that just came out recently, whatever. Back, I think, came out about 5-10 years ago. Does anyone know how long ago? 2008. 2007. Okay, it came out in 2007. I remember back then, subhanAllah, people went to the theater and they came out, and a lot of Muslims who went to go watch that movie, they came out thinking I cannot believe I just watched a porn, right? Because there was nudity, there were people having sex and things like that. And subhanAllah, fast forward, 5, 10, 15 years or whatever, people went to watch the new one. I'm sure there's probably the same type of scenes in the new 300 that there was in the old 300, right? But not a single peep was made. SubhanAllah, I have tons of friends on Facebook. That's one of the ways where I keep my pulse on what's going on in the world when it comes to young people and things like that. Not one post, I didn't see a single post on Facebook about, you know what, maybe we shouldn't watch 300. Maybe we shouldn't do it because there are scenes with nudity and people having sex and things like that. Right? Not a single post. And that's just the difference between now and like 5-10 years ago. Right? And so, as I said, even like women when they watch these movies and things, young girls when they watch movies and things like that, and you know, even in everyday society, like I said, you take young pop stars, Miley Cyrus, Rihanna, Lady Gaga, or whatever, they're pretty much like almost wearing nothing. You know, the type of acts that they do, and this whole thing happened with Miley Cyrus or whatever, she did some like crazy stuff or whatever. That is a version of pornography, right? It's kind of like, if you go back to, you know, can you pull up the first slide? The definition of pornography, or where the word pornography comes from, it comes from the Greek word pornographos, which means writing about prostitutes, right? So when you write about prostitutes, that's pornography. In our time, people say prostitution is the documentation of pornography is the documentation of prostitution, right? Where a woman is being paid, a guy is being paid to have sex, and that is what this person is watching, right? We just documented it, we put it on screen or whatever, and this is why a lot of people who are these days fighting for the legalization of prostitution. One of the arguments that they use is, what's the difference? What's the difference between prostitution and pornography? Right? A woman and a man are being paid to have sex. That's what prostitution is. Right? And so and a lot of these, you know, pop stars and things like that, this is the image that a lot of young girls have in terms of what looks good, what is attractive. Right? So you have a young girl who says, you know, I need to look like that in order to feel attractive. Right? And a lot of excuse that a lot of young people make is, you know, I'm just trying to express myself. Right? And the common phrase that we hear is people say, I'm trying to express my sexuality. That is a glorified way of saying, I just want to look like a prostitute. Right? Right? That's a glorified way of saying it. Right? Because you want to walk around without clothes and that's what you want to do. Fine, that's your thing or whatever. But don't tell me you're trying to express your sexuality. Right? Come on. And like I said, there's girls who can't look like that, right? And we put our self-worth into the way we look. And this is another one of the big, and I gave a talk on this whole issue of self-esteem and self-worth or whatever, but you know, we live in a society, we place so much of our self-worth into the way we look, right? If you look good, you feel good about yourself. If you don't look good, you don't feel good about yourself, right? And that's a separate topic and a whole other issue, but there's another host of problems that come with that as well. In another study, and I think this is the last study I'm going to quote to you, by the way. They did a study where they studied ex-porn users. Right? So they sat down and they took a group of people and they said, listen, stop watching pornography for a certain amount of time. Right? And what they found is that, so they studied them, they interviewed them, and what they found is that people who stopped watching pornography, that before in their life they were having issues that they didn't even know about. Right? Issues like loneliness, issues like procrastination, issues like not having drive in their life, and issues, even, as I said, psychological illnesses and things like that. They found that the only factor that was changed in this person's life was that they stopped watching pornography. Everything else was kept the same. Right? They just stopped watching pornography, and they found that people, in these interviews, people said things like, I realized I'm capable of doing so much more in my life. I found that I stopped procrastinating so much. I found that I was able to do this. I found that I had so much focus in my life. I found this and that because their whole state of mind actually changed here. And subhanAllah, some people, and by the way, there's a new trend these days where like non-Muslims are quitting, you know, pornography and masturbation and things like that. You know, and one of the biggest driving factors behind that is ED. Right? A lot of guys are afraid, and this is good reason. Right? All the other problems that we mentioned, the psychological problems and problems in relationships and all that, put that aside, just the fact that you may not be able to get it up one day, you know, for a lot of people it is enough, right? But that's at least one of the things that is causing people to stop. Now, I wanted to end, inshallah ta'ala, with some tips or how to overcome pornography addiction. Like I said, I don't want people to look at this and to think of someone else and say, you know what, I don't have a pornography addiction. It's not me. It's someone else. A lot of people, when they're asked about their addiction, one of the signs of an addiction is that a person is incapable of stopping, and we said people are in denial about their addiction, they will often say something like, if I wanted to, I could quit at any time, right? Or once I get married, I will stop, right? And the obvious thing we say to them is, okay, if you feel like you can stop whenever you want, then stop now. And if you can stop, then you're not addicted. But if you can't stop, or you come back to it after a certain while or whatever, and after a while you're like, I haven't masturbated in so long, but now I'll be okay, there's a big sign that you are addicted. But some of these points, inshallah ta'ala, they're advice for them, and this is compiled from a couple different resources and from a little bit of experience in terms of counseling some young people as well. So if you don't have a problem with pornography, inshallah you don't. But if you do, inshallah ta'ala, you can benefit from this. At the very least, if you're not dealing with this yourself, when people come to you for advice, then inshallah ta'ala, you can talk to them, and these are some of the things you can get them, some of the things you can advise them with when it comes to their problems with pornography. Number one, the brain can be rewired. Right? So what they found when they did like these brain studies and things like that is that yes, pornography is very strong in creating those connections, but as opposed to some of the other addictions, it is possible for a person to rewire their brain. Meaning it is possible for a person to get rid of their pornography addiction. And one of the things that they mentioned about pornography is that cold turkey works with pornography. With a lot of addictions, it may not work. Right? With a lot of addictions, like you need to taper yourself off or whatever. But when it comes to pornography, cold turkey works. Because that is a way that you can rewire your brain. Number two, consider the victims of pornography and the porn industry. In the hadith of the young man who came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, "O Messenger of Allah, make it permissible for me to commit zina," the Prophet ﷺ made him realize the effects of what he's asking for. All right, and likewise, we as Muslims, it's about us, it's about our relationships, but also we need to look beyond ourselves. We need to look at what we are contributing to when we watch porn. And I know somebody, one brother said to me, they said, I don't pay for porn, so I'm good, right? I just watch free stuff. SubhanAllah, whether you're paying for it or not, you're still contributing to keeping the porn industry going. The way things work is supply and demand. The more demand there is for pornography, the more pornography is going to produce. That's just the way it works. But a person, and this is one of the advices I would give, is a person who's struggling with a porn addiction, just take a moment to consider what's happening outside of you as an individual, right? Even the fact that this woman that you're watching, this is someone's mother, or this is someone's daughter, or this is someone's sister, right? And even, subhanAllah, I would even say that the next time you sit down and you watch porn, say to yourself, what if this was my sister? And I know that may be like, too visual for some people, maybe too much for some people, right? But sometimes that's what you need. Ask yourself, would I be okay with one of my relatives doing this? Right? Would that be okay for me? So think of what's happening outside of just you as an individual. As Muslims, we very much pay attention to what's happening in society. It's not only do we not want harm for ourselves, we don't want harm for other people as well. And subhanAllah, even like the status of a woman in Islam is incredibly, even the Arabic term for a woman is hurma. Hurma means someone who is sacred. Someone who needs to be protected, someone who you hold at a very high status, right? So just the fact that a person opens up pornography and they watch these women being degraded and used and this and that, means that they don't value this woman. Besides the fact whether she's Muslim or not, right? Besides that, the fact that she's a woman, right, means that when you do that, think about it and be like, listen, I'm actually helping degrade this woman. I'm agreeing with what she's doing, and I'm helping her do what she is doing. It's very easy to, and one of the things that happens is subhanAllah, and this is one of the tricks of shaitan, by the way, is that he will cause us to look at our sins and try to rationalize them, and especially when it comes to pornography, people tend to objectify the women that are in pornography, for example, or even guys as well. But a person may view pornography and look at this individual as just someone who's one-dimensional, like almost like it's a fictional character, and it's like an animation. This person isn't real, right? That they're just there to provide you with some type of arousal, right? That's their only job. That's what they're there for. And the reality is that this is a real human being. They have a life just like you have a life. They may have children. She definitely has parents, right? Siblings, cousins, this and that, right? So put yourself in that position where you can look at the context. Number 3, as I said, and I alluded to this before, but also take an objective look at yourself, where in ALS, one of the advices that I give is think of it as an outer body experience, right? Think of yourself, imagine yourself sitting there, and you can do this right now if you have an issue with pornography or you view pornography. Just imagine yourself sitting there by yourself in the dark or whatever, the room is locked or whatever, and you turn on this whatever, you log on and you start watching these videos. And you pull your pants down, right? And you take out some lube, and you do this. And and I know most people are like, why are you saying that? Does that make you uncomfortable? Do you even think about that?
Yes.
Yes. Good. I'm glad one person's uncomfortable by that thought. The rest of you guys, Allah about it, right? But when you think of yourself in that position, right? That's not an honorable position to be in, right? Where, like I said, if you were to take yourself and look, like I said, have outer body experience, look into yourself like that's what's happening in that situation. That could very much help as well. Controlling one's gaze. Obviously, we know lowering your gaze or controlling your gaze is a big part of Islam. It's a big part of our etiquettes and our morals, and part of who we are as Muslims. And there's a lot of hikmah behind that. And it's very interesting how in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I believe it's Surah Nur, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, tell the believing men to lower their gaze. Right? In the very next ayah, it says, tell the believing women to lower their gaze. And I know a lot of people tend to think of lowering the gaze just for guys. Right? Like guys should lower their gaze, women can do whatever they want. Right? That's not how it works. It's for guys and girls. But what it says here is controlling your gaze other than porn. Right? I'm not talking about lower your gaze when you're shown porn. Right? Obviously, lower your gaze when you're shown, don't look at it. Right? That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about in situations where it's not porn, but it's something that you shouldn't be looking at. Right? Whether it be TV, whether it be movies, whether it be magazines, whether it be an article on Facebook, whether it be someone's profile picture that's whatever it is, but something that will cause you arousal. It's something that you shouldn't be looking at. And one of the things that leads to pornography is, especially for people who are married and stuff, they don't have a halal way to deal with their desires and stuff. But they may look at something very that most people would consider very normal. Right? It's just a woman on TV or whatever, and something which is not that, she's not nude, but she's wearing a bikini. And that may be the spark that leads a person to masturbate or a person to watch pornography like an hour or 2 hours later. Right? So making a conscious effort to be like, think about the fact that this one image could lead you to looking at pornography. This one movie or whatever the scene is or whatever it is, control your gaze in that situation, even when you're out and about. And I know, alhamdulillah, it's winter right now, but summer is coming up, right? Especially those of you guys who go to college and things like that. I remember when I started practicing Islam. I started practicing Islam when I was in college, and it was summertime, right? And subhanAllah, and people had told me this, you should lower your gaze, it's part of Islam or whatever. And I was like, good, gotta do it, right? And subhanAllah, I realized the blessing of lowering your gaze when I was in College Park during the summertime. How many people here have been to the University of Maryland College Park? What's in the center of the university?
Big old field.
It's a big old field. What do people do in that field in the summertime? What do girls do in the field in the summertime? They study, right? Back when I was there, girls would lie out there and tan as well, right? A lot of it happens now. But even that, right? Just walking across campus, something like that, even you making a conscious effort to control your gaze, Lord, and look, it's not easy. I get it. We live in a society where we're taught to make eye contact with people. We're taught to look at things. We live in a very voyeuristic society. We're taught to look at people. We're taught to look at people's lives, reality shows, and this and that. We're constantly looking at people. We're constantly interested in what's happening in other people's lives. Even if you look at Facebook and Twitter and things like that, what is that except a chance for us to look into people's lives? Right? I wonder what this person is doing. I wonder, so people post their own, and that's the type of society we live in. Right? We're taught to look at anything and everything. Right? Everything is interesting for us. And subhanAllah, a good example of this was, and I'm not just going to live a controversial up here, because I had to mention something controversial. The whole thing that happened with Sheikh Abu Isa a couple weeks ago. How many people here know what I'm talking about? Okay, that's not too bad actually. And there are people are shy, but even this number here is too much, right? I remember SubhanAllah, if you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. Don't go look it up, please. Right? That's the point. That's the point here, right? Don't go look it up. Don't go search Google about what happened after Isa. But the point here is that some people, and I got questions and messages and emails and this and that. They're like, what do you think about what's happening? Do you think what he said is okay? Blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. And I said, and some of the questions people said, I don't know who this Abu Isa character is, but what he did is wrong. Right? And a lot of people, they jumped on just because they wanted to see what's happening. The same reason why you're driving down 495 and you see an accident and it has nothing to do with your life, right? You're actually getting late for work, but you slow down, you look over, like, I wonder if someone died. I wonder if somebody's limb got chopped up, right? That's the type of society we live in. And SubhanAllah, talking about celebrity culture, SubhanAllah, one of the things that is very, very, it happens in a celebrity culture is that we love to raise people up. We like to take like the dumbest, stupidest people and make them celebrities, right? Excuse me. Not only that, but that's only half of the equation, right? That's only half. The other half of the equation is we like to raise people up and we like to watch them crash and burn. And this is why, take Justin Bieber, take Miley Cyrus, Britney Spears, whatever, people love it when they break down, right? That's entertainment for us, right? And the same thing, I found so many people just like, what used to think, so many people jumped on board, right? They're like, yeah, let's see what happens, take him down, fire Abu Isa, like, khalas, like, get rid of him, whatever. And SubhanAllah, once again, I was like, a lot of these people, right, who are really concerned, and SubhanAllah, I was speaking to someone who was so concerned about Abu Isa, this thing they said and all this stuff that happened or whatever. And this is a brother, I know this brother. This dude doesn't even pray his prayers. He doesn't even pray, like forget 5 times a day. He doesn't pray like a single prayer. Right? And this is like the biggest issue. And I'm like, SubhanAllah. Like he doesn't know what Abu Isa is, he doesn't know what Novelty is, he doesn't know any of this stuff. Like he doesn't know what's going on. But he's like so interested in hearing my opinion or this sheikh's opinion. Once again, we live in a very voyeuristic society. We like to see things. We like to see people destruct and burn. We like to see that, right? And so I get it. I get it's very difficult to lower your gaze, but this is something that it takes patience and it takes perseverance, just like our whole lives. Just like with everything else that we're doing in our life when it comes to praying and being obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when it comes to fasting, qiyamul layl, whatever it is, there's no one who is perfect, right? Even somebody who prays they pray their 5 daily prayers on time, every single day. They pray their sunnahs, they pray their nawafil, they pray everything. Even that person, their prayer is not perfect. Right? At some point, they may have thought about something else. At some point, something else may have happened. Even Umar radiallahu ta'ala, there's an authentic narration where Umar radiallahu ta'ala says, I was once standing in my prayer and I started to count the army. He started to count the number of people he had in his army. Right? And this shows that this is how human beings are. Right? We're not perfect, but we are taught to. And this is why, by the way, one of the reasons, the hikmahs about of saying astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah after you finish praying is to ask Allah to forgive you for the shortcomings that you had in your prayer, because everyone has shortcomings, right? But just like you view your other actions, you view your ibadat and all that kind of stuff, the same type of approach should be taken to lowering your gaze. It's very easy, and this is one of shaitan's tricks, is to come to you and say, you can never do it. It's not going to happen. It starts with this trick of shaitan. It starts with people's iman. You will come to somebody who's not a practicing Muslim, not a religious Muslim, and say, you can never do it. You're just a bad person. You can never become a religious Muslim. You can never become I know I'm over time. He'll say, shaitan will come to this person and say, you can never do it. You're not good enough to become a good Muslim. And shaitan will say, why even bother praying when you commit this, that, whatever. Right? But even when it comes down to the individual sins, shaitan will come to you and say to you, don't even bother, because you're never going to do it. Right? And even when it comes to pornography, subhanAllah, don't let shaitan get you to lose hope. Every time you come back to pornography, make tawbah again. Seek repentance and make the intention to get rid of this problem. What part was that? Number 4. Okay, I need to rush through some of these points. Identify the emptiness that you are trying to fill with porn. One of the things that they have found, a lot of counselors, they say that when people turn to something like pornography, and even other addictions, whether it's drugs or this or whatever it is, that usually there's something missing in their life, there's an emptiness in their life that they're trying to fill, and this is why they turn to things like this, right? So once again, be introspective, and if you can't do it yourself, I would actually even say get counseling. Go speak to a counselor, go speak to a psychiatrist, talk about your life, talk about your problems, talk about your issues. They may help you identify the emptiness or the holes that are in your life that you are trying to fill with pornography. Number 6, identify patterns in your life. People who watch pornography, or people who are into pornography and stuff, if they just looked at the patterns in their life and how they approach pornography, it's easy to find those patterns. So one thing which is very common is most people watch pornography in isolation, right? They're not around other people. Inshallah, right? At the very least, they're not around other people. So they're in a situation where they're by themselves, right? Or they're in a situation where it's usually after midnight. It's usually when this or that. So once you identify the triggers of what caused you to watch pornography or whatever, you can identify those things and stay away from those type of things. For example, point number 7: spend less time alone. If you find that you usually watch pornography or whatever when you're alone, then you need to stop being alone so much, right? Busy yourself with things that will take up your time and take up your day, where you don't have time to do nothing. And sometimes people turn to pornography simply out of boredom, right? They're bored, they got nothing to do, so they turn to pornography. Number 8, fasting, right? SubhanAllah, I remember speaking to one brother, and I said, you know what, you should fast. You're having an issue with pornography? He goes, yeah, that never works. Right? Yeah, I know the Prophet said that you should fast, but that just never works. Right? There's no scientific proof for that or anything like that. And SubhanAllah, and I say, SubhanAllah, the fact that the Prophet advised that, Prophet, as we know the hadith, I believe it's in Sahih Bukhari, the Prophet said, whoever amongst you is able to get married, so they should get married. And if they're not able to get married, then what should they do? They should fast, right? And now, subhanAllah, studies are showing that a decrease in calories leads to a decrease in libido, right? So when you're hungry, or when you there's less food in your body, and there's less of that, it also kills your sex drive, right? So a person is in a position where they're addicted to pornography, or they feel like they must turn to pornography. I'm not saying that's the solution, but I'm saying that's in all the stuff that I'm mentioning here. It's not that all these points are not individually the solution. They could be, but that's not what I'm saying here. It's definitely something that very much helps, right? It very much helps. There's a separate topic, but there's also a very strong link. There's a lot that overeating and obesity has in common with pornography and pornography addiction, right? We talked about an increase of dopamine in the brain when people overeat and things like that. It's very similar to releasing dopamine in their brain. And this is why, subhanAllah, just like, so many people are addicted to pornography, likewise, so many people are fat, right? 4 out of 5 Americans are overweight. They're obese. And subhanAllah, I live in Saudi Arabia, and I know I pick on Saudi Arabia a lot. It's because I lived there. I got to see, the inner workings of Saudi and stuff. But subhanAllah, I noticed even in Saudi Arabia, now you see that problem. More and more people are becoming overweight. Food is like a big industry there now. I was in a taxi once in Medina, and the taxi driver, he's talking to me. He's like, "Where are you from?" This and that, all that kind of stuff. And we were talking about something, and then he said, my whole family, they run restaurants. He said, I'm the only one who drives a taxi. And I'm like, oh, really? He goes, yeah. He goes, they say in Saudi Arabia that if there's one business that will never fail, it's a restaurant, because people love to eat, right? And subhanAllah, we see the same thing. Just like we give into, we give into our desires when it comes to pornography and these images and over-sexualized images and things like that, nudity and all that kind of stuff. Likewise, this person is also, they will be likely to give into their desires when it comes to eating and stuff like that. And by the way, if a person is able to control themselves when it comes to their eating, and they're able to calm their desires, this is actually a good sign, right? This means that inshallah ta'ala, the fact that you're able to do that means inshallah ta'ala that you'll also be able to deal with your porn addiction. Number 9, openly and freely address the problem, attack it head on. This is something which I think needs to be like a community effort. We need to make it so that people who are dealing with like a porn addiction or people who are addicted to pornography and all that, that they feel comfortable to address this problem head on. Right? That they feel comfortable talking. It doesn't have to be an imam, it doesn't have to be a sheikh, it can even be like one of you. The fact that you attended this talk tonight, you probably know more about the issue of pornography than the average person out there. Right? And you have some solutions to the issue of pornography. Even you can advise someone to be like, you know what, pornography is dangerous because that harms you, harms your brain, harms your relationships, you probably won't be able to get it up. Right? And here are some solutions. Right? But the fact that we need to make it so that the Muslim community is a place where people are comfortable talking about these problems, they're comfortable talking about these issues. Number 10, porn is not an option. Well, this is one of the things that I often tell people. Someone who's dealing with a porn addiction, I tell them you have to get into a mindset where you tell yourself that I will never watch porn again. You need to be okay with that type of lifestyle. Right? Sometimes people quit porn, they're like, yeah, I'll quit, but in the back of their mind, or on a subconscious level, they're like, yeah, but eventually I'll go back to porn. Right? You need to make it so that pornography is not an option. Right? We talked about cold turkey and things like that, and studies have shown that cold turkey works. When it comes to pornography, cold turkey works. Lastly, and this shouldn't be lastly, this should be number 1, but seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help. Constantly being in a state of relying upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of the best things that we can do is to fix or improve our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The time that you're spending improving your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is doing 2 things. Number 1, you're using your time in a better way. You'll have less time to do haram things. Number 2, you're putting barakah into your life. And you have the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being there to help you and support you get over this problem. This is not just pornography, this is any problem, obviously, right? But increasing your relationship, and this is why one of the first pieces of advice that I give to people who are dealing with pornography or whatever, I say to them, how is your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Is there a single moment in your day where you call out to your Lord? And I know SubhanAllah, people sometimes pray, they do everything, but that question right there, and SubhanAllah, we tend to look at prayer as just like something you have to do. A prayer, or a salah, namaz, whatever you want to call it, it's a chance for you to speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a chance for you to ask of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a spiritual moment. Right? So ask yourself that question, like, what type of relationship do I have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Is there at least a minute of your day? And SubhanAllah, today as I was leaving to come here for this talk, right before Maghrib, I got a text message from someone saying it's the hour before Maghrib, make dua. Right? As might ask, one of the times where dua is more accepted is the last hour of Friday or the hour before Maghrib. Right? And SubhanAllah, I immediately stopped and I thought to myself, I found all this commotion, I was like getting ready, trying to get out of the house, I'm like Virginia, so far away, but there's no traffic, I want to get lost at GMU, all of that happened by the way, except for the traffic. Definitely got lost, right? But I was like, SubhanAllah, like, if I'm not trusting in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for me to get there, if I'm not asking Allah's help for all the things that I'm planning to do in my life, like, that makes no sense. Right? So for a moment, and Jazakallah khair, brother, sent it, right? But for that moment, I paused, and like everything, just my whole perspective on what I was doing in that moment just changed. And that's what dua does. That's what turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does. It changes your perspective. And that's what the salah is supposed to do. Right? It's not supposed to be, let me just pray this real quick, I got 5 minutes, let me just get it done. Right? I know we tend to think of salah like that. Alhamdulillah, at least the person is doing, at least they're praying. I'm not saying that if your prayer is not full of khushu' that you shouldn't pray. At least you're praying, alhamdulillah. But what the prayer is supposed to be is for you to take a moment and put things into perspective. Right? It's to connect with your Lord. Right? So improve your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And lastly, I'll say that, alhamdulillah, we're not sweeping this problem underneath the rug anymore. Right? I'm very, very glad, and I hope this is like one of many events, inshallah ta'ala, that more and more people are talking about this and speak about this. And this is one of the many issues that is plaguing Muslim societies, Muslim communities, us as Muslims living in America. I believe the sister spoke about, what did you speak about? Domestic violence, right? Another issue. All of these issues need to be addressed. They need to be talked about head on. Right? And I'm really, really grateful, alhamdulillah, that the MSA put on an event like this And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reward them and to give them the strength to continue. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us all the strength to address these problems that we're having in our community. Lastly, if you can pull up the last slide. I'm sorry to go over. The last slide is some resources. Some of the things that are helpful if you're interested in this topic or you're interested in getting help and all that. Number one, there's an awesome book called Pornified. It's written by Pamela Paul. It's an awesome book. After reading that book, it will just change your view of how harmful pornography really is, right? This book is amazing. It's awesome. And I would say, if you're not going to read the whole thing, at least skim through it. Just take a look at some of the studies that have been done, and you know, some of the effects that she talked about. It's a wonderful book. Secondly, there's a website called purifyyourgaze.com. It's one of those websites where you can sign up, and basically they help you deal with like your porn addiction. And I haven't seen the inner workings of it. A lot of people have said a lot of good things about it. They said that it's a community type of thing where there's people helping you deal with your problems, and I think it's anonymous and things like that. So good website. There's another website called yourbrainonporn.com. There's so much information on there. There's a lot of good reading on there. The other one, fightthenewdrug.org. It's actually a movement, a campaign to get like young people and actually get everyone really to quit pornography and actually change our perception. Like I said, many people, especially in American culture, American society, we don't look at porn as such a bad thing, right? And as time goes on, it's gotten worse, obviously, right? You can look at the way porn was before and the way porn is now, which is a separate issue. But pornography has gotten a lot worse. But this is it's a movement to change people's perception about pornography. Also, if you're into like TED Talks and stuff, I think it's like a 10-minute video. It's called The Great Porn Experiment by Gary Wilson. Wonderful. He talks about some of the studies that I talked about here. He's a scientist from a scientific point of view. So those are just some of the things. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.
Takbir! Takbir! Takbir!